Welcome to Midweek Mysteries, and thank you all for being here. As always, I'm your host, Nick Ryan. If you're new to the show, Midweek Mysteries is a shorter version of our full-length Sunday episodes, where we also enjoy giving a personal shout-out to our newest supporters, so please be sure to tune in. If you're interested in supporting what we do here, please visit us at patreon.com/Paranormal Mysteries, or head on over to buymeacoffee.com/paranormal, where you can make a simple one-time donation. And of course, subscribing to the podcast and sharing it with your friends is one of the best ways to show your support, and we appreciate it. Now let's start the show and see what today's storytellers have to say. Today's first midweek mystery comes to us from Abigail. Abigail's story is called My Haunted Life. Abigail says, "Hi, Nick. I wanted to write you about what's been happening in the house I currently live in with my husband. Before we got married, he worked the night shift, 2 p.m. to 2 a.m., and I was home alone a lot. One night I was making our bed around 11 p.m., and I felt like someone was watching me. Our bedroom window faces out the front of the house towards the street, which is about 20 feet away. I quickly turned out the lights and looked out the blinds to see what looked like a woman standing in my yard. It was too dark out to see any defining features, but she had long hair to her waist that looked as if it was dreaded. She looked as if she were staring right at me, like she knew I was there, staring at her too. There was a light-colored car parked on the road, waiting for her. I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. I was frozen as I watched them. The headlights on the car started suddenly switching on, and the woman sharply turned to look at the car. I panicked, jumped to the floor, and called my husband for him to come home. Once I got off the phone, which only took about 3 minutes, they were gone. Another time, I was out with some friends and came home late. My husband used to leave the keys to the gate in the mailbox for me before I got a set of my own. We have a privacy fence in the backyard with an automatic gate that opens with a clicker. I went to the mailbox to get the keys as I usually do, and they weren't there. I drove around the back, and the gate was wide open, along with the back door to the house. I called my husband to ask him if he came home for dinner and left the gate open. He said no, and I immediately hung up and called the police. The officer was very polite and searched my house for me and found nothing except our keys on the dining room table. Due to this, we bought security cameras and put them all up outside. And after that, nothing else happened outside, but it all moved inside. My husband and I were playing pool, which is in our front room, right by the front door. We had just broken, and we heard a knock at the door. Our cameras alert our phones when it senses movement, and there's one right above our front door. We didn't receive any notification, though, but we went to check the door together. We both walked onto the porch and looked around, and we saw nothing. We were outside for about a minute and went back in to find the pool balls in a straight line down the center of the table. We had just broke, so when we left, we knew for a fact that the balls were all over the table. On another night, we were playing hide-and-go-seek throughout the house. It's a pretty big home with several rooms, so just playing the two of us was one of our favorite things to do together. We had played for hours until my husband wanted to watch a movie. We sat for a while until I had to use the restroom. I went to use the guest bathroom, which is in a corner of the house, with 2 other rooms, his office and my son's room. I was washing my hands in the sink, which is right in front of the door. I heard feet running up to the door. I even saw the shadow under the door. I saw them run off to the right, towards the 2 bedrooms. I called out to my husband that I didn't know that we were playing anymore, or I would have taken a flashlight. I opened the door, and it was dead quiet and dark. I went into my son's room first and found no one. He had to be in the office, so I looked there next. There's hardly any furniture in there, so I expected to find him there behind the door, and yet there was no one. I walked back to the den to find my husband sprawled on the couch. I asked him if he had come to tease me while I was in the bathroom, and he told me that he had been sitting there the entire time. He's not one to mess around or lie, so I knew that he wasn't the one that did it. My last and most important one happened just a few days ago. I was home alone, as usual, doing some cleaning. The plaster on the ceiling keeps chipping onto the stairs, so I decided to sweep it all up. I was on the landing at the top of the stairs, and saying some pretty derogatory things about the ghosts that were giving me a hard time. It all seemed to escalate when I said, "I'm not scared of you." There are 3 rooms upstairs, and all the doors were closed, but once I uttered the last syllable, all 3 doors started to violently rattle at the same time. They shook and shook and shook. I started to have a panic attack and fell to the floor and screamed, "Stop!" They all stopped at once, and I got up to run down the stairs and find my phone. I was shoved hard on the middle of my back and caught myself before I tumbled down the stairs. I called my husband at once, and he came home from work to comfort me. He said that he's always felt something in the house, but he's never experienced anything. He does have dreams, though, about a little boy and a girl, telling him to make her go. I don't think they like me at all. Thank you for taking the time to read this very long composite of stories. I know it was a lot, but I appreciate the space you give me to tell others that actually believe me about what's happened. I have more, along with some remote viewing stories as well. Be safe out there, and God bless. Abigail. Our next story of the night comes from Susan. Susan's story is called Time Slip. Susan says, "Hi, Nick. I am binge listening the podcast and loving every minute of it. My entire life has been paranormal, and I am only accepting the whole of it now, at 59. In this lifetime, I am here to help people who are awakening to their spirituality, so they can join all of us to bring the Earth into the 5th dimension. It is no coincidence that all these people are listening. They are all awake or awakening to their spirituality. But this is for another story. This is my time slip story. In early August, I was in Walmart. Yes, a place to see weird things, but I was not ready for this. I was walking down the main aisle when this tall gentleman literally appeared 5 or so feet in front of me. He was a tall, good-looking man, dressed in a 70s leisure suit. He was walking in a cross aisle, but was not interacting with our time. Forgive me, this is difficult to explain. From the moment he appeared, the atmosphere around me changed. I saw him. I saw the Walmart shoppers, but they seemed to be outside of him in a box of about 5 feet. It was like he was interjected into our time, but not totally acting in his time. I was in the year 2020. He was in the 1970s. I watched him, but he disappeared, and 2020 Walmart filled in where he had been. The atmosphere changed back, and my head was buzzing. I bought whatever I needed to, and went back to my car. When I moved into this area, there was nothing on this land before the Walmart was built. My friends that grew up here had told me that there was a restaurant, an entertainment venue in the 60s and 70s that had burned down. It was right where the Walmart was. I've seen ghosts and shadow entities. This was entirely something different. My friends say that the veil between worlds is very thin as the Earth is transitioning to the 5th dimension. Expect to see more of these things. Just know you aren't crazy. These things do exist. Thanks, Nick, for your consideration. Keep up the good work on the podcast. Susan. Our last midweek mystery comes to us from Becks. Becks' story is called Coexistence. Becks says, "Good afternoon. I wanted to share my story with you. My 6-year-old son and my flatmate Nicole and her 4-year-old daughter lived in a large old home in Dunedin, New Zealand. When I moved in, my landlord told me there was a spirit living in the home, but that the presence had never bothered her. I am no stranger to the spirit world, so this did not faze me at all. I took the house, and we all settled into everyday life. Strange things happened all the time. However, we were not worried until the landlord told us she was putting up the house on the market, and we had to move. While I was picking up the house, I moved an old antique wardrobe that had been beside the door to my bedroom. I hadn't taken much notice until this time. That night, I felt an angry presence standing by my bed, and it felt malicious. I turned the lamp on. However, I was unable to sleep. It felt like the presence wanted to hurt me. The following morning, my 6-year-old son said to me that he was scared of his room, and he wanted to sleep with me. I called a friend of mine who was a light worker and asked her to come by and tell me what she thought. She arrived and walked into the lounge and stopped short. She said there was an old crone glaring at her from the far corner of the room, and that it did not want her there. It was angry and capable of harm. She asked me if there was anywhere else I could stay until we moved, and proceeded to tell me some history of the house and what it was used for. She said there were records of some kind hidden under the house, and the crone did not want anyone to find them. She suggested we might be comfortable staying with her, and said she felt unsafe and needed to leave. Naturally, I decided to stay on and finish getting the house ready for sale. Nicole arrived home, and I proceeded to fill her in on Tanya's visit. Nicole couldn't let it go. She wanted to go under the house and find the records and uncover the secrets of the old villa. I didn't think it was a good idea and thought we should stop discussing it. That night, I was trying to get my son into bed, and I could hear Nicole's daughter running through the house upstairs. I called upstairs and asked her to get into bed, as my son had school in the morning. She called back, "Becks, I'm in bed." This went on for some time, until I became annoyed. I grabbed some lavender oil to sprinkle on her pillow, and hoped that she would sleep. As I went upstairs, I heard her again, running up the hallway. I got to the top of the stairs and looked into her room, and she was fast asleep. I went and checked on my pregnant flatmate, who had been unwell all day, and she was quietly watching television. We spoke briefly, and I returned downstairs to check on my son. As I reached the top step, I felt a sharp shove between my shoulder blades, and I fell down the stairs. Nicole came running from her part of the house to see if I was okay. There was no one else in the house besides the sleeping children. There was no rational explanation for what had happened. I went to stand and realized that I couldn't. Nicole helped me to the couch, and this is where I slept until morning. I took myself to the hospital the following morning to find that my toe was broken from the fall. Later that day, I hobbled into the house in my moon boots and crutches to find all Nicole's belongings in the hallway. She was incredibly upset. While I was away, there had been some loud bangs coming from within the walls, and she had decided it was time for her and her daughter to leave. My son and I were left alone, to the mercy of this ugly spirit. I asked my friend to come by and help me move my bed into the lounge, and I used salt to seal my bedroom, where the antique wardrobe still sat. I sealed all the windows and doors with salt, and my son and I settled in the lounge for the remaining 2 weeks before we moved. That night there was loud banging coming from the now empty upstairs flat that Nicole had vacated. There was loud footsteps running from one end of the flat to the other. My dog began to bark, and my son refused to sleep. I barricaded us into the lounge with the animals, and we lay awake all night, hoping the nightmare would end. I dropped my son off at school the following morning and made myself a cup of tea, and I reached out to some Wiccan friends on Facebook for help. I told them my story, and several of them told me to get out and fast. I sat in tears with my broken toe, all alone, wondering how I would finish up cleaning the house and handing it back to the owner. I became angry and yelled out into the empty house, "I am not leaving yet. We must learn to coexist. There is nowhere for us to go. You stay upstairs, and we'll stay down here. Just leave us alone." Naturally, she didn't answer. The house remained still and quiet. Too quiet. I went out to visit a friend and returned home around dinner time. The house was quiet and calm. We ate dinner and took the dog for a walk and then settled down to sleep. Sleep came peacefully, and we had an undisturbed night. I called Tanya the next day and explained what I had done, and she said she would come and take a look. She arrived and had a look around. She said that a black weight had lifted, and apart from some residual energy, the old crone was gone. For now. My son and I had finished packing up the house and prepared for our flight to another town. We handed the keys back to the owner, and Tanya arrived to take us to the airport. We went back inside for one last quick look around to make sure that we hadn't forgotten anything, and we prepared to leave. Tanya stopped short and turned around. She muttered, "She's back," and she snarled at me. I rushed out of the house so fast, called out, "It's all yours," and shut the door. That was 4 years ago. We live in another part of the country now. She has never appeared again. She does not haunt our dreams, and our new home is filled with light and love and warmth. Kindest regards, Becks. As we come to the end of this edition of Midweek Mysteries, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. And a special thank you goes out to Abigail, Susan, and Becks for writing in and sharing their experiences with all of us. If any of you have thoughts, advice, or a similar experience that you'd like to share with one of tonight's storytellers, you can email me, and I'll be sure to forward your message on to them. If you've witnessed something unexplainable and you'd like to have your story shared on the podcast, please contact me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or visit paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. Until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Saturday with a little Halloween surprise. From all of us at the Paranormal Mysteries Podcast, thank you so much for listening, and please remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.